It's a marvelous Monday. We have our brackets. We have baseball. The NFL is in full swing, making crazy moves day in and day out. And the Chicago Bulls were able to find a victory against a team with length. It is Mike Mercado here on the Sports Cubicle with the one, the only, the marvelous one, Dan Marver. Marver, how you doing, buddy? A lot of news to get to today.
Doing great. It's March Madness. And I don't need any artificial stimulants now. I'm okay.
All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start doing some of these heavy hitters a little bit behind the curtain. If you're watching us on youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you joined us on WCPT 8:20 a.m. Sunday nights with Paul Shawari, Devin Tingle, the marvelous one, Dan Marver, and myself, Mike Mercado, on the Sports Cubicle. But behind the curtains, we are actually waiting for the brackets to be announced. So while you are watching this, you already are filling out your upsets, getting ready to get your pool going at work or at school. The marvelous one and I will be able to enjoy who got in, who didn't, what bubble got burst, and who looks like they have a chance to make it all the way to the Final Four. But before we get to all that, let's go ahead and hit home some recent stuff. And when we actually had a chance to talk about it, it was Devin Tingle and myself, Paul Shawari as well. We were talking about MLB. The news had just broken. We were all able to kind of get together for a few minutes and try to talk about the excitement of it. And in the middle of our conversation, Khalil Mack was traded from the Chicago Bears to the LA Chargers. So the marvelous one here, somebody who loves the game of baseball and loves the Bears. This has been a whirlwind of a week. A lot of different emotions if you're a baseball fan, where it seemed gloom and doom, and then at points your hopes got super high. And then the Bears making a lot of transitional moves right now with the new regime. We're going to start with baseball because that news broke first. But if you want to see our reaction video, you could do it wherever you get your favorite podcast and right here on YouTube and on Facebook. But marvelous one, the deal got done. We're going to get baseball. The DH is coming to Wrigley Field. We're going to get all 162 April 7th. Circle your calendars, your thoughts as we get America's original pastime back in our lives and in our hearts this summer.
Well, I'm very happy, particularly since they will have a full season. It's going to be 162 games starting April 7th. They'll be starting the spring training games Friday, the 18th of March. It will be a shorter spring training than usual, obviously, but they'll get it in. And then they'll add a few games at the end of the year to make up for the ones that are going to be missed in the first week or 10 days. And they're going to do some doubleheaders, 9-inning doubleheaders. And possibly we may have some extra inning games without a runner at second base. I also like that.
Can we talk about that for a second, Marvelous One? Well, I get it. I played baseball my entire life, high school. I love it. It's, I go part of season ticket packages for the Chicago Cubs. And I get the role, the old school and like the tradition of it. I'm not going to say that it's bad or whatnot to these rules. But I do think that there was a certain kind of coolness, not necessarily to the runner on second base and extra innings, but I did like the 7-inning doubleheader for today's baseball. There is, we all know that it's more of a bullpen game. So the fact that your starting pitcher getting to the 5th inning is kind of the game in itself, and then you go straight to your killers in the back end of your bullpen. I think that was the one rule that I was kind of bummed out that they didn't keep. I can live without the extra, because when you getting rid of the shift, you're going to have more action on the bases in theory. But what did you think? Like for somebody like me, I traditionalist as well for the most part, but I did kind of like that rule of 7-inning doubleheader, keeps things fresh and keeps things moving.
Oh yeah, that's true. There are two sides of that question. Obviously if you're at the game, you don't want to be there till 2 a.m. And I get that. So that made the game quicker. I guess the idea was there was less, contact and potential spread of COVID. That was the 7-inning, and the runner at second base rule. So that for me, it didn't, I got used to it. It stopped bothering me like it did at the beginning. So I actually was kind of surprised. I was more surprised about that than the universal DH in a way, because the National League had been so resistant to it for so many years. But I think it's the question of more people can stay in the game this way, like a Schwarber or a Cruz or these other guys that are probably going to be free agents. I mean, that are free agents now that can be DHs in either league for as they get older, obviously too. So, I thought that the 7-inning doubleheader seemed kind of hokey at first. It felt like watching a college game, which is, or whatever, so it didn't, it seemed like it was something that was inappropriate, but I get it. I mean, you're going to be using up your pitchers, first of all, with the 9 inning doubleheaders. You're going to be, using more players that way. And it may water down the game a little bit, let's say for the next day. Let's say it's a doubleheader, and then they have a game the next day, and you've used your entire roster in a 15-inning game or something. It's going to be crazy. But, it wouldn't have bothered me that much if they kept the 7-inning doubleheaders. But the runner on second base, that one I didn't want to see continue.
Yeah, I mean, for the time that it was implemented, I could, understand it. I could live with it. But if we're going to go on and I don't think that was ever the problem. I think it's the way the game is played sometimes, that you need action, you need guys in bases, you need the ball to be in play. And I don't think a runner at second is inherently going to be that. But what I find interesting, and you brought it up, is the universal DH thing. We've been doing this for a long time. Marver, you've watched a lot of baseball. You've talked a lot of baseball. And, when you and Jerry Riles were holding it down over at the Rewind Sports 60, this was something that would have been topic number one. The universal DH coming to the National League. The Cubs will no longer have a Carlos Zambrano. I'm all for it. Look, it's adding an extra roster spot. It's getting somebody who's a specialist in its own. While a pitcher hitting is its own specialist, so is a universal DH. So is a DH themselves having to learn, if they're like the David Ortiz type, to how to keep warm, how to keep engaged in a game when they're not on the field. So I think it's fine. What I find fascinating, and I want to hear your thoughts, that this would have been the conversation number one. And it's just kind of a byproduct of like today's day and age. Did it surprise you how nobody really even blinked an eye to the universal DH?
I think people were just happy that the thing was settled. You're still going to have Ohtani, of course, of the Angels batting. But here's the thing that was stupid about it. Okay, you'd have interleague games, and now you'd have the American League pitcher batting for the first time all year, or maybe in their entire professional career. And it was ludicrous, to have, the pitcher batting from the American League team in the National League Park in the interleague games. That's the thing and then even more so in a World Series game that occurred, but that's not even all of the changes. They may have a home run derby to end an all-star game that's tied, and they're going to have the playoffs. The 1 and 2 seeds are going to get a week off, while 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5. They've added another team. They have 12 teams, so there are some other changes. And they had, both sides had to give in. And I know I said it all the time, millionaires versus billionaires, and a battle wasn't. So I couldn't really take sides on that. But I'm glad that it's over and that there'll be games. And it's going to be warm enough this week to play games in Chicago, oddly.
It's a good sign that the Gopher finally let it go their grip. Here's the one thing I will say, and you and I have talked about it before. I do think that it was millionaires versus billionaires. I'm happy for the young players and the guys that are looking for their first contract, that they're able to now have 5 years in the CBA, to have that opportunity to strike a big deal, to win the lottery, and make some real money for the next generations in their family. And I'm with you. I'm excited that we're finally ready to get baseball back. But I want to talk about that playoff thing really fast before we move on from this conversation, because this is going to be an amazing time when we see, the Cubs have made some few moves, the White Sox have made a few moves. We'll talk about that on the next episode when everything kind of settles down and we see some of the big contracts, so we can have a better idea of what the rosters look like. But I do like the idea of a wild card round of a best of 3, and then a divisional round for a game best of 5, and then a league championship series best of 7, including a World Series best of 7. I do think that there's more of a balance. There is a football element to it where you win a division, you've earned the right for a bye week. And I think that's kind of cool. What do you think about the way they've set up the playoffs?
I also like the 3 and 4 will be hosting all 3 games. So there is some incentive there, but it's going to be kind of goofy if 4 and 5, let's say, are tied and they have some kind of tiebreaker and they basically have the same record, but 4 gets all the games. That's the only part of that might be a little bad. But, the thing is that for the White Sox, it would have been great last year. They wouldn't have to play Houston. They would have had a best of 3 series against Toronto right away. And if Toronto didn't make the playoffs, they would have been the extra team, and the Sox would have played them in a 3-6 game, and then they would have moved on maybe to Houston or whatever. So it would have benefited them. They would have gotten maybe their chops against Toronto and maybe gotten some steam going before the next round. So I think that it's a good thing. The argument could be made kind of like in the other sports where a team plays that one week, like even in the NFL, where the wild card teams seem to do a little better than, like this year, for example, the 1 seeds were knocked out.
Yeah. And a wild card team went all the way to the Super Bowl.
Right. Exactly. So that could happen in baseball too, particularly since these baseball teams will be off for a week, the 1s and 2s, I think, the way they've got it set up. And I hope that there's some warm weather teams. Now they've added an extra week to the regular season. So the entire World Series will probably be in November this year. So that could be interesting if you're going to be in Boston or Chicago by some miracle.
I was going to say,
in November, so that's going to be interesting too. But I like the expansion of the playoffs. That's nice, but all in all, I think that it gives a little bit more excitement. Like last year, there were teams that were left out, like a Toronto and a Cincinnati, that would have made it under that format.
And as we are talking about baseball being back, Rutgers and Notre Dame will have to play each other for a chance to get into the tournament. We are currently watching the brackets, breaking down Gonzaga, obviously a 1 team in the West region, and we'll be breaking it down. We're going to wait for the entire brackets to get down. We wanted to make note of that because of our friends here in the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and of course our neighbors in Indiana, big Notre Dame fans listening to us here on the Sports Cubicle. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver, on a marvelous Monday here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm Mike Mercado. Of course, you could check out Devin Single and Paul Javari also on the Sports Cubicle throughout the entire week. But Marver, I'm excited. We got baseball back, and we could talk about transition moves that they're going to make. We could talk about the White Sox and Cubs, how legitimate either team is going to be, the kind of moves they're going to be. And that's going to be a fun conversation that we can finally have next week, because we'll see what happens with Carlos Correa. We'll see what the White Sox do. Both teams are making moves, but we'll have to see how it goes further with the luxury tax changes and what these new media deals are going to be. But staying in Chicago, let's talk a little bit about this Bulls team that, again, a murderer's row, a meat grinder. You and I talked about this. I mentioned it with Jonathan Hood. This is a team right now that is going to earn whatever playoff seed they get in the Eastern Conference. And it's interesting to see that you get Alex Caruso back, and the defense just changed completely. And this was a Cleveland team that gives the Bulls a tough time. They didn't have Lauri Markkanen, and they also have another big injury, one of their all-stars. So this is a team that isn't at full strength, but it was a must-win for the Chicago Bulls. And Marvelous, you're seeing this Bulls team, you're seeing the schedule they have coming up. You see that the Eastern Conference standings are super tight. Your thoughts on the Bulls over the last few weeks?
They did hit a bump in the road. They had a tough schedule and all, but I think a part of it is because of the players. I mean, Levine's been injured. He didn't play yesterday, and it was great to have Caruso back. The whole thing showed in the defense they hadn't held a team under 100 points in some time. But we were talking about this road trip, Sacramento, Utah, and Phoenix, tough road trip, and based upon everything that's going on, I mean, they have slipped down from the one spot, but again, we feel confident that they'll be in the, all you have to be is the 10 seed now to get in the playoffs. So I'm pretty confident that they're going to make the playoffs. So it's just a matter of getting healthy and here down the stretch, holding a position where hopefully they can get home court even. And that would be a nice thing too. But I think there will be a true test coming up in the next week or so, a tough road trip. And, I think that all in all, that it's been remarkable. I mean, yesterday, I think that Vukovic was the top scorer, so they can get production from other places other than DeRozan every game. But the defense was really good against Cleveland last night. They really produced, and the Caruso is definitely an energy guy. It was great to have him back,
and he puts them in the right direction. He's calling out the defense, and you can see that Ayo, who, we're talking about a first-round talent that found his way into the second round. The Bulls found a gem in that pick, and he is just a sponge to whatever Caruso is doing out there. And while he gets caught making mistakes because he is a rookie, he just seems to be in the right place at the right time. And same thing with Caruso. Speaking of Caruso, he needs to stay off the ground. Stop jumping so high in the air. Stop falling behind other players' backs. None of us can afford to see that man get injured again. It is so great, though, that this is such a tight Eastern Conference. While I may never forgive John Paxson and Gar Forman for not going for it when the Eastern Conference was so much easier in quotations, but just to show you how tight things are, you have the Miami Heat at the number 1 seed at 45-24. The defending champions, the Milwaukee Bucks at the 2 seed at 42 and 26, the Sixers at 40 and 25, the Bulls in 4th seed at 41 and 26, the Celtics, the red hot Celtics, the Celtics that nobody wants to play in the playoffs, 41 and 27, the Cavaliers at 28 and 29, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 goes Raptors at 37-30, Nets 35 and 33, the Hornets 33 and 35, and the Atlanta Hawks 32 and 34. And it is scary when you see that the Brooklyn Nets are right there in the 8th seed, and Kyrie Irving is going to be able to start playing in Brooklyn very soon. The mayor said it himself in a press conference when he got heckled. So we're going to see what the Bulls have coming up in this gas tank, because Marvelous, you brought it up too, this schedule, and we'll look into it right now, because the Bulls, they need to be able to, they're going to make the playoffs. Top 10 teams do, right? But you don't want to be in a one-game playoff, and you want home court advantage as best as you can, because this Bulls team plays a lot better at home than they do on the road. They're not a bad road team, but they are a really good team at the United Center. The Kings aren't a pushover. They're a team you should beat, but they're not a pushover team. The Utah Jazz are a playoff team. The Phoenix Suns are the best team in the NBA and probably will win the NBA Finals. You have the Toronto Raptors, where you can bury them in the playoff seedings, and then you have to play the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks again. So if you're looking at this schedule, where do you think they actually end up? Do you think they stay at 4, or do you think they jump up the standings? Are you worried about Boston jumping the Bulls? Where do you think they kind of land? Or are they pretty much where they're going to settle in by the time we get to late April?
Well, right now, I mean, they have the half-game lead over number 4 Celtics. The Celtics last 10 games, they've been 8-2, and the Bulls have been 5-5. So the Celtics are trending in a way that they might be 3. Yeah. Now, I like being in the top 4. Number 5 now is if you go down further, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. The Bulls are 4, and then the Celtics are 5. So I want to stay in those top 4 spots. Cleveland's in 6, and they're another almost 2.5, 3 games actually behind the Bulls. So if we can stay in that top 4 spot, that'd be great. But I'm worried about the Celtics passing us, honestly, would be, my concern. The Heat are 1, and the Bucks and Celtics are, we're actually tied with the 76ers for 3. So I'd like to stay in that top 4, but I'm worried about the Celtics passing, because, right now, trending Celtics, 8 of the last 10, that's good. And the 76ers have won 7 of the last 10. Bucks and Heat also 7 of the last 10. So, it's going to be tough to keep that home court advantage. They might have to end up playing the Celtics eventually, in Boston in the extra game, but that would be okay. We just got to keep going, keep the pedal to the metal, as they say.
And it'll be interesting. Look, in the first round, you're hoping for an easier, again, in quotation, easier matchup. It gets dirty and tough as soon as you get to the second round in the Eastern Conference moving forward. The Bulls are going to have to just get healthy. And we have some news here as the bracket again is being broken down. Michigan did end up in the South region, where your University of Illinois Fighting Illini are, as well as a 4th seed. They will be taking on Chattanooga. The number 1 seed in the South region is Arizona. So this is interesting times. We know Notre Dame will have to play in to get into the tournament. And now we know that U of I, the co-champions of the Big Ten, are in the South region as a 4 seed in the same side as the Arizona Wildcats, a team a lot of people have a feeling can get all the way to the Final Four. Marvelous. We're going to continue on with the Bulls conversation, but your initial reaction to U of I getting into this.
And even our local Loyola has to play Ohio State. We were talking about this, and we'll talk more later, that a Rutgers Notre Dame game, they used to have only the week, the so-called week 1 bid conferences playing in the playing games, but a Rutgers Notre Dame game is a pretty decent game for what a so-called play-in.
Yeah, and as the Marvelous One said, it is a 7-10 matchup. Ohio State will take on Loyola. Again, both Illinois teams are in the same region, but won't be playing each other, I believe, if in the next round. So there will be some distance between these two teams meeting each other in this bracket. Your initial thoughts as you're looking at this bracket now, we have an idea. These are the local teams that have made it into the tournament. And I guess 2.5. Shout out to all the Notre Dame fans. I for one, do not consider them a local team, but for this sake, we'll call them a local team. So 3 local teams. What did you think about how this worked out for our state schools in the NCAA men's bracket?
I think that Illinois got an okay matchup with Chattanooga. I mean, Chattanooga is one of those 1 bid conferences. So, they ought to be able to advance there, but then they'll get probably Houston in the next round, which is
it's Houston,
gonna be a tough
UAB.
game.
Yeah, Houston, UAB, Seton Hall, TCU above them as the 8-9. Arizona will either play Wright State or Bryant. And are you surprised? And as this bracket shows up, we'll give it some context. And people have known this, but I want to talk to you about it. Ohio State and Loyola will either play Villanova or Delaware. So it's not easy for either one of these teams. Michigan in the same side of the bracket, along with Tennessee and Colorado State. I mean, these two schools have a tough road to a national championship. Do you think, and we'll get back to the Bulls a second, and we'll finish up our bracket at the very end. Do you think that there is a chance that either one of these teams finds their way into the Sweet 16?
I would say, looking at the bracket, it will be tough. I could see them advancing one round, but that second game is going to be very difficult against a Villanova or Houston, for example. So, it's still, it's all matter of matchups and who's hot at the time. I mean, I was surprised Michigan got in. Sometimes as a fan of a certain school, I'd say, okay, well, we didn't make it, but we're good enough to win the NIT, which isn't too bad either. Go all the way to New York and get to celebrate a championship. So, I mean, last year Memphis went all the way and did that. It's in the NIT. So at least the nice thing is there'll be fans. We don't have to play the whole thing in Indianapolis. I feel sort of a relief. I've been going to games without masks on. I mean, it's almost, I had like a flashback. I was in a gym that I was 2 years ago, just before the pandemic ended. I was in the same gym. It felt like, like time had disappeared, so to speak, over a 2-year period. So that's a good thing. I just hope we don't have to go back to I was worried, but I had a mask on my chin, I wanted to have, in case somebody was sneezing or coughing. I wanted to be prepared.
Just in case for the peace of mind, you have your beer or your Coca-Cola on the side. You have a nice little pretzel or pizza or hot dog, and you're masky in case things get a little nuts in a fun environment, but you still want to be in a fun environment. And that's what March Madness is. And I think we'll get back to the conversation of March a little later on this Marvelous Monday, but this was a lot of fun being able to see where these state schools are coming out, and the fact that you have 2 local schools and Notre Dame, 3 schools that are going to be highly invested. 2 of them for sure going to have a date on Thursday and Friday. One of them a chance, an opportunity to get part of the big dance. It's a lot of fun. And the fact that the world is where it's at right now, this is a nice distraction coming up week, and to see fans there and students there. And hopefully everybody is safe and sound, but it's going to be a good time, and it should be a good time. And we're going to have a wonderful first 2 weeks of the bracket, because we all know the first 2 weeks, I'm getting goosebumps thinking how much fun this can be. And if the local schools do well, we're going to sizzle, my friends. But finishing up the Bulls conversation, I think it's nice to see them starting to get better. It was a really nice treat to see Alex Caruso, the news break that he was going to play. It was a bummer that Zach LaVine's knee was acting up, but that's going to be the thing moving forward with Zach's knee. It's just going to be maintenance. And we hope that he feels confident enough that he gets to the end of the season. We know that there's going to be surgery. We just know that. The real question is, he's going to get a max deal, maybe not a super max. So how much flexibility does that allow the Chicago Bulls? I brought this up to Jonathan Hood, and I want to throw it to you, Marvelous One. I think Jokic is the Bulls' target in 2 years. I think that's the guy that they're going to use to replace the contract of Nikola Vucevic. And he has a relationship with the front office already. There's only so long that he can hold out in Denver. I understand Giannis stayed in Milwaukee, but Giannis also won a championship. That changes things. What do you think about the future of the Chicago Bulls and everything you're kind of seeing long-term for this team?
I mean, that would be a good acquisition. No joking, no question about it. And of course, well, as you talk about there is that relationship with the general manager and the Denver organization from before. So hopefully they would bring a guy like that here. But I think they're well set. Talking about free agents for next year, obviously, at the guard position. I think they're in really good shape there. But I always said they needed some frontline help, and even for next year or beyond, they need to enforce that or reinforce that with additional help, and that would be an excellent choice. I don't think the Greek Freak is going anywhere, but that remains to be seen.
I got a special stat for you. This is from Brad Evans, who, if you're a fantasy fan on Yahoo, he's moved on from there, but he's a big name when it comes to U of I stuff, a fan of the Fighting Illini. Stats to remember, Illinois fans. Chattanooga is number 333 in the country in 2-point percentage defense over the last month. Kofi should beast and beast and beast. So we'll see if they are able to get out of a first round trap and move forward. But yeah, we'll see with the Chicago Bulls, how they're able to move forward in this season, this campaign, take it one step at a time. We talk about expectations. Let's make sure that we enjoy these next month and a half. They get healthy and enjoy playoff basketball. Win a series, and we'll see how it breaks down. But we want to know your thoughts. Let us know on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. How are you feeling about the Chicago Bulls? U of I fans and, of course, Loyola fans. Also, let us know, what did you think about the seeding? Let's go into some more basketball talk just for a few minutes. We don't really have to spend a lot of time on it, but it's something that I think is important. You and I have kind of gone back and forth about this conversation, but it's the Brittney Griner situation. You've seen a lot of conflict. I was born in 1990, so I don't know a lot about the Cold War. I didn't live in the Cold War, but history books, just seeing how reality works. You see the conflict between the United States and Russia and what's going on between Ukraine and Russia at that border. Brittney Griner, what would it be nothing in the state of Illinois and 30 other states and maybe a few countries. She got herself in some big trouble, and this is a interesting conversation. I want to throw a point that I've been thinking about for a little while, but your initial thoughts on this Brittney Griner story, a huge star in the WNBA, and here locally, WNBA taking off because of the Chicago Sky becoming a championship organization. So your thoughts when you heard this story?
I believe that she was playing basketball over there, and she got caught with this substance, like some kind of vaping substance, isn't it? I'm not even sure what it is.
So if for anybody who's not here in the state of Illinois, marijuana is legal. You could get it recreationally or you could get it medically. And there's different ways of having said marijuana. You can have it in a vape oily type of way, which is just like a vape pen. You can have it the old school way that you've seen in all the movies and whatnot. And that's one of the cases here. I don't know where exactly she lives, but like you could go to Las Vegas or California and get just a vape pen, and it's inconspicuous. It doesn't smell, it doesn't reek. So it's one of those newfound age ways of being able to have it. And then you have a young superstar who does this. So Marvin, continue.
Yeah, well, the thing is that our show wasn't heard in Russia, is it?
Yeah.
I would not be shocked if it turns out that it was planted. Seriously, that would not shock me. Now, on the other hand, I'm concerned from the standpoint that they never said that they had anybody during the Cold War, but 30 or more years ago, there were prisoners in the Soviet U.S. that were never came home. They died in a prison there, and they don't tell you about it. Well, here we know about it. The State Department's going to do what they can, but at the moment the situation is such that we're walking on eggshells to not start World War III. We want to be careful how we supply the Ukrainians, and if they go into Poland, they got the whole thing where we now have to protect the NATO countries. So this guy Putin is reckless in that regard. So I'm just afraid that he's gonna one of his bombs is going to inadvertently go into Poland, and then we have to go defend Poland. I mean, when it gets further west, they're near the border. So eventually they may, on purpose or inadvertently, shell Poland. And now all the NATO countries have to come to the aid of Poland, according to the NATO agreement. So that's what I'm concerned about. Griner, I'm afraid, is going to be there for a really long time, if not her whole life, based upon the past history and how they don't, I'm surprised in a way that we even found out that she was detained. So that's remarkable. So that's helpful, I guess, that we know, because there are people there, the families never knew they were detained. Yeah, and so they couldn't do anything about it. So because they said, oh, we don't have that person. So, but here, there's apparently confirmation. The State Department's going to try to do what they can, but I haven't seen any action yet on that, unless I'm not up to date. And with the current situation, again, walking on eggshells, you don't want to start World War III, obviously. Not that this would do it, but any action that's provocative, when you're dealing with somebody as reckless as Putin, you have to be very careful.
And you just said it right there. I mean, you're dealing with Putin. You're dealing with an old KGB officer. You're dealing with somebody who knows what this real Brittney Griner story is. We found that 3 weeks later. And I think this is something that people have to be very careful for. It's like, you can't go rushing in on any type of judgment. We don't know what we're being fed, what they're telling us, what's the truth, what's not the truth. And like, that's the scary thing about this. You're right on the money, Marvelous One. And I mentioned this before. This is a star WNBA player. Again, this also shows the not the disequality, the idea of like, if this was an NBA player, they'd be home already. Like, this just goes to show. Now, imagine if this was an average citizen. You would never hear of them. And that's your point. You would never hear about them. They would just be lost forever. And this is the one lesson I think we all need to learn. Being unaware is also being ignorant if you're traveling around the world. I don't think that was the case for Brittney Griner. I'm talking about the 18, 19-year-old who's never traveled before, but they believe that just because they're an American, that the world is going to make sure that you're comfortable and that you're okay. It's like, know where you're going and know the rules, because everywhere isn't San Diego, California. Everywhere isn't Austin, Texas. You're not going to Chicago, IL. Oh, you love Brooklyn, but when you're going to Moscow, when you're going to Beijing, make sure you know what you're doing. And I don't think that's not what Brittney was doing. But Brittney's got the ear of some people. Somebody knows her name. Do they know your name? They don't know my name. So that is something to really make sure you drive home. Marvelous. Any final thoughts? We'll keep our eye on this Brittney Griner.
Right. Well, speaking of San Diego, I don't think you're going to be sending a Navy SEAL team in to rescue her like they might in someplace like Pakistan or someplace. Yeah. So that's the problem. We're not going to have like a raid on the prison.
Yeah.
Not that we could even find out where it is. So, I feel bad for, her and her family and such, but I believe that this is going to be a problem that cannot be resolved easily.
Yeah, and this is going to be something that's going to be it's going to be a bummer. And I think that even if we get to a point where we find out more news, I still think that there's a chance that it's going to take a long time. And because it's Russia, who knows how long we're going to get. This is going to be until we get real information.
Right.
But we did get some information. And if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on in the border of Ukraine and Russia, or this Brittney Griner story, of course, keep up to date with here on the Sports Cubicle on the Brittney Griner story. Whatever we find something out, we'll keep you posted. But if you're looking about what's going on in the conflict, WCPT 820 AM, Monday through Friday, and of course, through the weekend, make sure you check us out. And at the heartlandsignal.com website, they're doing some great and amazing stuff there that we haven't seen in this company, and super proud of the work they're doing on that. And super proud of Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus making moves, whether they cite you in the sense of you're disappointed who was in the moves, who's not coming back, who got cut. But it is time for a new start, a new regime. And I believe that this Khalil Mack trade, cutting Eddie Goldman, getting rid of Tariq Cohen, getting draft picks back, I think this is all a sign that they are going all in on the future of Justin Fields, or at the very least getting ready for whatever they believe is the future of this franchise. Marvelous, when you saw the news break, when we get baseball back, that hours into that, not even hours, minutes into that, Khalil Mack is traded and the Bears get themselves a 2 and a 6. Your thoughts on these moves by Ryan Poles, the new GM of the Chicago Bears?
Obviously, they're planning long term. I don't think they're looking at 2022 as a Super Bowl season. They're looking down the road. I mean, the thing with Cohen, I never understood. He was injured, and he was about to come back, and never came back.
Really weird.
So that was kind of weird. And Goldman is a salary move, clearly. But in terms of Mack, I told you off the air, it's kind of funny. I was at work, and I saw the story break on Mack, and it says, as the article said, Mack has been dealt to San Diego. And I said, oh, my God. He must be an outfielder, because the only pro team now in San Diego is the Padres. It was just a mistake because, it's the Chargers, obviously, but
yeah,
they ain't in San Diego anymore.
And that goes to show branding, because they are the San Diego Chargers. I don't care how much you try to make the LA Chargers a thing. They are not a thing. It is the San Diego Chargers. But, I do think that this is an exciting move because the Bears are going to start fresh. They're going to try to start fresh. They're going to have a lot of money over the next few years. I think Khalil Mack still has some good football left. And I think if you use him the right way, where you're not having him drop back all the time, where you're having him just rush the quarterback and be a absolute, maniac against offensive linemen and just be a menace to them, that's where he shines. The Bears don't need that. Khalil Mack's a luxury for the Bears. He's not a necessity. Now, if he goes to a team like the Chargers, they can go all the way. They can win a Super Bowl. They are ready for a real push. The Bears aren't. They're rebuilding. And what I'm hoping for is with the money that you're cutting and that you're getting ready for these salary dumps, unless you have number 1 overall draft picks, it's hard to find offensive linemen that are good. You got to pay for that. So you got to pay for offensive linemen. What you need for your draft picks is you got to go get weapons for Justin Fields. Justin Fields needs weapons. You need to find him his Jamar Chase. And you got to make opportunity with opportunity. Because here's also the thing, too. Even with Allen Robinson, the Bears have the worst wide receivers room in the NFL, I believe. I believe they have the least amount of talent in the NFL when it comes to that position. So if you're asking me, I think that's where their money's going to go to this coming up offseason. Now, Marvelous, when you see the moves, what would you like to see the Bears go and get? Is it weapons for Justin Fields? Do you want them to go and get help for Justin Fields on the line? What are you eyeing? What are you scouting for when we get into OTAs and minicamp?
Obviously, the line is a problem because Fields was running for his life at the beginning of his time as starting quarterback. So the line would help, and to have a deep, good receiving core, and probably some additional depth at running back. We showed some depth with all the injuries, but in the long term, maybe not in 22, maybe 23. That's what they're looking at, getting the draft picks down the road. You may not get anybody, who's going to be a superstar in the 5th or 6th round. But even still, to add some more bodies, in the depth category would be helpful. The line, number 1, and I like our defense, even without Mack, honestly. We could still be pretty effective defensively. And, the history of the Bears is the defense has always been a strength. So I think they're going to be okay there. But I think they just have to utilize whatever Fields' weapons are to the best of his ability, because that wasn't what happened last year.
And don't forget, the head coach of this team now is a defensive-minded coach. So you have to hope that even if you don't have the greatest of talents, that he's going to be able to get that out of his team, that's what he's going to be able to coach. And that because you're just overstuffing that offense, that's going to make it work, that they're going to be able to find a plan that gets it into that. And if the Bears are trying to get fast, I think that's the big thing too. We've seen Bears teams kill teams with power, whether it's on offense or defense. But having a speed demon type of Bears team will be very interesting to see. And that's what I think they're building for the future. And I think that was solidified when Aaron Rodgers signed his extension. And I want to get your thoughts on that, because that was a huge day. I mean, we're talking about Carson Wentz heading over to the Commanders. We're talking about Russell Wilson going to the Broncos. You have Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay. I mean, there's moves that are happening right now. And I think the Bears saw in their own division that if we can end up as just the number 2 seed, because Kirk Cousins is up or down, who knows? Like, stats will tell you he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFC right now, because the NFC isn't as stacked. But the Bears, I feel like, are even rebuilding, are as much of a mess, if not when it comes to Minnesota or Detroit. We're not talking about world-class organizations. So the battle for 2 is right there for the Bears, but not that 1 seed, not that number 1 in the NFC North. So when you hear and saw some of these moves, your initial thoughts, especially Aaron Rodgers.
Well, Aaron Rodgers' moves eliminated the possibility of the Bears winning the division, I thought.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, not keeping in mind that right now, I guess continuing next year, there'll be 7 teams in each conference that make the playoffs. I think that the possibilities have improved a little bit in a way, because Wilson goes to the AFC. So, I mean, Seattle didn't do that well, but with him, they were a playoff contending team, Seattle. So that's one less team they have to worry about, because Seattle's going to be bad. Washington, I don't think will be that much better than they were. I think that, they're improved a little bit, and Wentz is, he wasn't a superstar even with Philadelphia. So we'll see what happens with that. So they'll be the best number 2 in their division, and maybe they can sneak a 7th place like they did in the 8-8 year 2 years ago. It's a possibility. We'll have to wait and see what the schedule's like, because they will have an easier schedule because of their record than they had this in 21. So we'll wait and see who they play and when they play them, but they may be able to actually sneak in a few more wins against teams that were also in their spot in the standings.
Well, how many times have we seen in Marvelous in the NFL season that these games are, unless you get blown out early, everybody's in the game. Everybody's in these games. If you're within a possession, 10 points, 13 points, you're in every NFL game just by the rules themselves. I think the Bears need to find themselves in a position where, look at, we know that Devontae Adams got the tag, the franchise tag. And so we know that the Aaron Rodgers experiment is going to keep going in Green Bay. They're going to try to move around the salary cap. But let's say you find a way this year. I mean, we've seen with injuries, we've seen with games. I mean, do you think that Green Bay maybe overextended, got a little nervous by extending a Aaron Rodgers contract? Now, granted, anybody in the NFL was going to give him a contract if he hit the open market. But they paid him a lot of money. They don't have all of the playoff success. They have a bunch of regular season success. Were you surprised the amount of money they gave him? Were you surprised that they bailed on Jordan Love? I mean, we know that they're going to at least win one more NFC North this coming up season. But were you surprised the huge investment they made with this extension?
Yeah, I actually thought that he might have moved on. I really did. I was surprised at the amount of money, and I mean, and you know, because he always could have been the host of Jeopardy if he needed to be.
You know, and before we move on from the NFL and we kind of finish up our thoughts as the bracket is finally making its full appearance, we finally kind of see everything, how it will break down. Do you think Tom Brady comes back? I mean, this is something that I've been pondering. I think he's done, but I can easily see him waiting 1 year, getting healthy, and then going to San Francisco, especially if Trey Lance isn't working out or Jimmy G continues to not work out. I mean, you've seen all this go on, but you've seen him be able to leave on such a high note, winning a Super Bowl and making the playoffs the next year. Do you think Tom Brady comes back for another season in the NFL?
Wow. You know, I think that after a year of, maybe he won't be on his protein diet this year, you know, but the thing is what will he be, 46, 47? I mean, it's getting to the point where, you know, it's getting to the point where if he takes a year off, you know, and gravity and nature may be taking its course a little bit, even with a health freak like him, and he may like the idea of hanging out with the supermodel. So I would say no.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no, but you can never count it out, especially in today's crazy day and age. And of all people, I'm not going to doubt Tom Brady. Let us know your thoughts, though. What did you think about the Khalil Mack trade? Where do you think the Bears are headed to over the next few years? How excited were you kind of seeing the transactions happen in the NFL? We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. And we finally get to the main course. The bracket is being broken down in front of us. We see what's happening between UBI having to take on Chattanooga and Loyola Chicago taking on Ohio State. Both teams in the South region, the region with the Arizona Wildcats as the number 1 seed. So we're seeing the bracket. We're not going to make predictions. We'll keep up to date for those of us on the show that do brackets. We'll keep up to date and we'll post them and we'll have fun with it. We'll talk about it on the show, but we don't want to do predictions here. What I really want to talk about is, as you're watching the bracket, is there anything that's caught your attention? Any games where you're sitting there and you're saying, I'm going to watch True TV or TBS or TNT or CBS. This is the game I want to watch, other than the U of I and Loyola game, or even Notre Dame if they get past Rutgers.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, we've seen the other Big Ten teams. Wisconsin's going to be going against a toothpaste team, Colgate. Mm-hmm. So we've seen that. and so, I mean, it looks like there's a little bit of a shift to the West. You have a Baylor as a number 1. They won it last year. They've slipped down the stretch a little bit. And, you have Arizona as a number 1. You have Gonzaga as a number 1. And Kansas is the other number 1. So usually you have at least one of the number 1 seeds get going all the way. Now, Gonzaga's always been a sort of a mystery to me because they play in a conference where they're hardly ever challenged. But they're a good team, and they win a lot of games, and they win the non-conference games against elite teams. So I like them still, but in terms of the first round, I've always said it's, 40 minutes, somebody gets hot, anything can happen. You have a 13 beating a 4 almost every year. So it's hard to say, but it will be interesting to see how these Big Ten teams do because there was a lot of parity this year. I mean, Iowa won the tournament, and they weren't the top team in the league. They weren't even in the top 4. So it's getting hot at the right time. Even like a Rutgers got hot and made the tournament, which seemed impossible when they were losing to DePaul in November. So it's funny the way it works. You've got to just be playing right at the right time, have your healthy team. So I mean, I'm not big on the prediction game, but I'm just getting familiar with the bracket. And as you're listening to this, you guys have probably studied the bracket all night. I know you stayed up all night, all you bracketologists, and have studied it, and you put money down. It's a big money thing now too, the brackets, particularly with all the gambling sites. But I'm not much of a prognosticator because I know that every year you're going to have some crazy Middle Tennessee, jump or whatever, jumping up and winning a game that's totally unexpected. That's what makes it interesting because it's a one and done and it's 40 minutes and it's, in some cases 19 and 20-year-olds. So who knows what's going to happen.
So what do you look for? Like, I'm somebody who likes, obviously it's very cliche, but you're looking for the age of these teams. How many seniors are on the team? What position are the seniors on this team, or at least the juniors on this team? I like picking teams that have big guards because I think at the end of the game, it just becomes who has the ball the most in their hand and is going to be able to make a play. So when you're watching these games and you're just kind of saying, oh, you know what? I think that team has a chance. What are you looking for when it comes to teams that can make deep runs? Is it the age of the team? Is it the way they play? Is it the size? What is something that the Marvelous One is looking at when he's trying to pick winners in the bracket?
I've always found that a team does really well when they have, good, strong guards, no turnovers. And a lot of times a big center is a big difference because not every team has a 6'11" guy in college. Purdue has one, for example, but sometimes that's a difference maker in the rebounding and some easy buckets from close in. So, I thought Purdue was probably the best team in the Big Ten, and they lost today to Iowa, obviously, but I think that they could make some noise out of the Big Ten teams. And I still am ambivalent about Illinois because last year, in my view, they actually had a better team with Iowa, but maybe they'll make some noise this year. But I think they can get by their first round for sure. I think the Big Ten teams, a lot of them, I think we got 7 of them in the tournament. They could really make some noise this year based upon some of the matchups I've seen, just glancing at the matchups as they're coming in real time with us. But again, strong guards, big guards, and a power center seem to be the formula a lot of times if you look at the winners in previous years.
And that's just a nice little trick from somebody who's watched a lot of basketball, who has a really great eye for seeing this young talent in such huge moments. And that's what this tournament is. And as we wrap up this marvelous Monday on the Sports Cubicle with Dan Marver, Mike Mercado, make sure you're staying with us all week with Devin Tingle and Paul Shivari as well. I wanted to ask you this, Marver. How do you celebrate the Thursday and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the first weekend of March Madness? What is it that you do? Everybody has their tradition. Paulie, Devin, and myself are at the radio station throughout the week, so we have our laptops up, whatever TV we can have up. My awesome high school Glow Grenadiers would have every television up with the games on because they wanted to get kids excited about college. So it was the greatest Thursday and Friday of the week. How does the Marvelous One enjoy the first week and weekend of the bracket?
Well, before I answer that, I did want to mention also, it's been a weird year because of the transfer portal and the COVID extra year. So you got people that have been playing in college 6-7 years. That's like insane, and some of them are in their 3rd or 4th school. So it's kind of nuts. I still am surprised when I see a player that's still playing college ball on a team that I didn't even know they're on anymore. But here's what it is. Here's the key. For all you people like me that will be at work, you got to get an Excel spreadsheet. You got to put an Excel spreadsheet up on your computer. It's very important with something work related, and then you can go back and forth with Chrome or Microsoft Edge and have the games. And then you have your phone. Now it's important. This is key. You can plug your phone in, and you need to put it on the floor or in a drawer. These are important things that you have to remember so that you can watch the games when you're at work. Now, of course, when I get home, I'll be, wall to wall till 11 at night. But at work, unfortunately, I'm still working during the day. So Thursday and Friday, Excel spreadsheet, phone in the desk or on the floor. Those are key things for you guys to remember.
My friend, we still have a lot to learn from the Marvelous One. We hope you've enjoyed this first edition of a Marvelous Monday. Make sure you check out the Marvelous One, Dan Marver, along with Paul Shivari, Devin Tingle, and myself, Sunday nights on WCPT 8:20 a.m. And along the entire week, if news breaks or we just want to jibber jab about stuff happening locally or around the sports world, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. Make sure you guys check us out on WCPT 8:20 a.m. SoundCloud to check out the entire episode of the Sports Cubicle on Sunday nights. And make sure you're checking us out on youtube.com/Mercado Airwaves Network to see the entire video version and any extra content that we put out there. We appreciate each of you helping us be the #1 sports show in Chicago Sunday nights. That's crazy. In Chicago, like that is an amazing thing. That's because of you guys and the amazing co-hosts that I have with Marvelous One Dad Marver, Paul Shivari, and Devin Tingle. Marvelous, before I let you free and you make your list for all the stuff we got to talk about throughout the week, and it's going to be craziness, and I can't wait to see how everybody take a look at Marvelous right now, because he's going to look a lot different come Monday after all the basketball he's going to consume. Marvelous One, any final thoughts before we let you free on this Sunday heading into a Marvelous Monday?
Yeah. Well, I was able to see some live high school basketball, and congratulations to all the winners in high school. You know, the Glenbard West team won 4A, and of course 3A went to Sacred Heart Griffin, and then the great Yorkville team, Yorkville Christian 1A, and then of course 2A was Nashville. So congratulations to all the high school games. That's my sweet spot. I love the high school games.
How was it the new format? We were talking about that a few weeks ago.
Yeah. The new format was great on Saturday. I didn't like the third place game at night.
Interesting.
Where they came back in some cases. Like for example, if you play, it was a double overtime game, and so the team had to come back and play a fairly meaningless game 2-3 hours later.
That's tough.
Yeah. And Simeon lost, and then they didn't seem to be particularly into it when they lost the third place game, quite frankly.
Which is what you and I were talking about. That might have been one of the fears.
Yeah, that's tough, but the format for Saturday looks nice, where you have all 4 games in a row, the championship games. That was kind of sweet. But the other problem with the third place games is by the time they give the trophies out for third and fourth place at night, they had the 4 games, the semifinals during the day, then they would start at night, say around 7:15, but then they give the third and fourth place trophies out. So the games weren't starting for the 2A and the 4A till 9 o'clock.
Oh, that's rough.
And so they were giving out trophies at 11:15. I didn't like that part of it either.
Not for high school.
If they did it any earlier, you'd have teams playing literally an hour and a half apart, which is kind of insane too. But they can tweak it, but they can't do this any other way logically than have it the way it is, because there's no other formula to have it so that they have the 4 games in a row. And that was nice. And their objective was to avoid competing against the NCAA tournament by having it a week earlier. So that's essentially, they succeeded in that. It was against the Big Ten tournament, but the Big Ten tournament, it's not the same thing. They're on games all day and all night. For example, on Saturday, we had the semifinals yesterday during the day, and there was, at night was the 3 and the 4A championship game. So they didn't have direct conflict with the Big Ten games yesterday. So in that regard, they succeeded. But and I liked the Champaign setup. Peoria was nice too for all those years. They had it looked like they had the students right behind the benches, which was nice. Since it's a bigger arena, they didn't have the students up in the balcony like they did at Peoria. Yeah. So because they have more seats, I don't know where the adults and the parents were sitting, because all you could see were the students behind the benches. So that was kind of a nice touch, and I thought that the announcing was good. I kind of like the veterans, Bernhardt and Lindo, who did the 2A and the 4A. I thought that Hall and Smith were a little bit weaker with the 1A and the 3A, but I enjoyed watching the games. I watched all of them.
It's going to be fun too, Marvelous One, because you see the end of the state championships, and then we get into March Madness, where you're going to see the college champion be determined in both. You see it in the men and women's game, and then we get to see the NBA finals. So these next 2.5, 3 months heading into summertime are a lot of fun for basketball fans. And I just want to say we appreciate you the entire season, seeing the future of the sport, because here in the great state of Illinois, there's going to be a lot of players that you've seen that are playing for state schools. So tough to do it in this environment, because there's so many great athletes, but we appreciate you being able to keep a scouting eye on that. And I hope everybody enjoyed this Marvelous Monday. I really did. We were able to really hit them all, touch them all, and we were able to really have a nice conversation about a lot of different things. So this was a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Marvelous One.
One final thought. I'd like to see Duke make a deep run for the Coach K, though. That would be sweet, and it's his final year, and that would be nice. I don't think they're going to win it all, but they were talking about having him be in the. I don't know if it turned out this way, be in the regional in Chicago, his hometown.
Yeah, they were talking about that.
I think that's the way it ended up when I studied the bracket here. But that would be sweet to have him at least win a regional here in Chicago and go to the Final Four in his last year before our own Glenbrook North John Shire takes over.
I will be okay with that. And I will allow that because we got to see the moment of him losing the final game and all the Duke students crying. So as long as I get one picture of seeing college kids crying in that stadium, I am happy with that. So we will see. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this marvelous Monday on the Sports Cubicle. Check us out Sunday nights and throughout the entire week. He's the one, the only, the marvelous one, Dan Marver. I'm Mike Mercado. We will see you next time here on the Sports Cubicle.